Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Easy English Spark. I'm so excited you're here today. In this series, we'll improve your English listening and speaking skills through an easy and interesting story. A real detective mystery you'll love. We'll take it step by step, so you can build your confidence and speak more fluently as we follow the clues together. Are you ready? Let's get started and light up your English journey. Chapter 1. The Discovery. Detective James Hawthorne was sitting in his small office, thinking deeply. A serious case had just come to his attention. A man named Colonel Darnell was found dead in his own home. The news was shocking. The colonel was an important man, well known in the city. Now he was gone, killed by a gunshot. The police had found Colonel Darnell's body in the library of his big estate. He had been shot through the heart. The gun used was his own antique pistol. But the strange thing was, nothing was stolen. There were no signs of a break-in. This meant the killer was probably someone the colonel knew. Someone who was already inside the house. Detective Hawthorne looked carefully at the list of people who were in the house that night. Any one of them could be the murderer. First, there was Simmons, the colonel's butler. The servants heard the colonel shouting at Simmons the day before. They had a loud argument. But what was the argument about? Could Simmons have been angry enough to kill? Then there were the colonel's 3 children. Edward was the oldest son. He lived in the city and owned an art gallery. He wore expensive clothes and drove a fancy car. But Detective Hawthorne learned that Edward's business was not doing well. Maybe he needed money. Maybe he asked his father for help. Maybe the colonel said no. Could Edward have killed his father in anger? Michael was the second son. He worked for a gun magazine and knew a lot about firearms. Everyone said Michael hated his father. They never spoke to each other. But why had Michael come to visit? Did he come to talk or to kill? The youngest son was Daniel. He was a doctor. He seemed shy and kind. But the detective knew Daniel had a problem with gambling. Daniel had lost a lot of money. Was he in debt? Did he come to ask his father for money? And when he didn't get it, did he kill him? Detective Hawthorne thought the case was very difficult. There were many questions, but no clear answers. Suddenly, a small boy named Billy, who was sitting quietly nearby, spoke in a serious voice. "I know who did it," he said. Everyone looked at him with surprise. "It was you," the boy said, pointing. "You took the pistol and hid it. You waited until everyone went to sleep. You knew the colonel always listened to the midnight news in the library. So, after midnight, you went inside the room and shot him." Billy clapped his hands and laughed. He waved a small toy figure in the air. "No, you did it again," his uncle shouted with a smile. "That's the third time you've won the Darnell murder game." "I don't know how you do it," Detective Hawthorne smiled. "Because I am a real detective," he said. "And the police always win in the end, Billy." Just then, Billy's mother came into the room. "Are you playing that old game again?" she asked, smiling. "We've had that game for years. We used to play it when we were children, James. Do you remember?" "Yes, Mary," the detective said. Every family in England had a copy of that game. It was the first big board game about a murder mystery. Everyone loved it. Mary picked up the small figure of the colonel. "Poor Colonel Darnell," she said, laughing softly. "You always get killed in the game. I used to feel sorry for you." Detective Hawthorne laughed too. He felt cheerful. He really enjoyed spending time with Billy and his family. It was a good weekend. On Monday morning, Detective Hawthorne walked into the police station with a smile. The superintendent looked at him and said, "You look happy." Hawthorne nodded. "I had a good weekend," he said. "But now back to work. What's happening today?" The superintendent said, "The chief wants to see you." A few minutes later, Detective Hawthorne was sitting in the chief's office. But now he was not smiling. "Did you say Darnell, sir? The Darnell murder game?" he asked. "Yes," said the chief. "You know it, right?" "Of course I do," said the detective. "But I didn't know there was a real place called Darnell Manor. And now you're saying someone was really murdered there?" The chief nodded. "Edward Darnell has been killed. Tell me everything." The detective listened carefully as the chief explained. "We got a call this morning. The local police found Edward Darnell dead at his home around 9 a.m. "Where was the body?" Hawthorne asked. "In the library," said the chief, giving a small smile. "The library?" repeated the detective, feeling a little strange. His head felt light. He tried to stay calm. "Was he shot?" he asked. "Yes," said the chief, "with his own antique pistol." The detective took a deep breath. The chief gave more background. Edward came from a rich family, but his father, the colonel, lost most of the money in bad business deals. Edward was still a student when his father died. Suddenly, he found out he had no money left, only the house. So, what did he do? The detective asked. "He made the Darnell murder game," the chief said. "At first it was made with cardboard and clay. Then Edward showed it to a friend at university, Lord Bradford. Lord Bradford liked the game and gave Edward $1,000 to produce it." The chief smiled. "The rest is history. Edward sold many copies. In 3 years he was rich. He made more games. The company became big." The chief paused for a moment. Then he said, "That's all we know for now. But there's one more thing." "Yes, sir?" asked the detective. The chief gave a small smile again. "You are going to investigate the murder, detective. You are going to Darnell Manor." Chapter 2: The Estate. Detective James Hawthorne drove early in the morning toward Darnell Manor. The manor was about 50 miles from the city. As he approached the large estate, he saw police cars parked on the side of the road. The sun was just rising, casting long shadows over the trees. Hawthorne stopped his car and showed his identification to a police officer guarding the gate. "I'm the detective assigned to this case," he said calmly. "Can you tell me how to get to the manor?" The officer nodded and pointed to a tall iron gate nearby. "Go through that gate," he said. "Follow the private road straight ahead. The house is about half a mile down the road. You can't miss it." Detective Hawthorne thanked the officer and drove through the gate. The private road was narrow and lined with tall oak trees on both sides. The leaves rustled softly in the cool morning breeze. Soon, Hawthorne saw Darnell Manor on top of a small hill. It was a big, old building made of gray stone. The windows were tall and the roof was steep. The manor looked impressive, but also a little lonely in the early light. More police officers were standing outside the front door. Hawthorne parked his car and walked toward the entrance. A local policeman met him at the door and said, "This way, detective. I'll take you to the library." Hawthorne followed the policeman inside. The manor was large and quiet. The floors creaked softly under their feet. They passed through a long hallway with paintings of old family members on the walls. Finally, they entered the library. It was a big room filled with shelves of books. Heavy curtains covered the windows, and a large wooden desk sat near the fireplace. On the floor lay the body of Edward Darnell. The detective looked carefully at the scene. The colonel's face was pale and peaceful, but the dark stain on his shirt showed where the bullet had entered his chest. Next to the body lay the antique pistol. Hawthorne noticed there were no fingerprints on the gun, and the weapon looked clean and well cared for. The policeman said, "The doctor thinks the colonel died between 8 and 9 this morning. No signs of forced entry, and nothing has been stolen from the house." Detective Hawthorne nodded. "What else do we know about Mr. Darnell?" The policeman replied, "He was 70 years old. His wife passed away 10 years ago, and he lived alone here since then." "Any family nearby?" Hawthorne asked. The policeman answered, "He had a son named Charles, but Charles died in a car accident in America 5 years ago. We don't know much about other relatives, just some distant cousins living in the city." Hawthorne thought for a moment. Who else was in the house when the colonel was killed? The policeman pulled out a small notebook. There were 4 people here this morning. Mr. Gray, the finance director, Ms. Wells, the marketing and sales director, Mr. Clark, the production director, and Mr. Ford, the managing director. Mr. Ford was the one who called us. Detective. Hawthorne made a note. Tell me about Mr. Ford. The policeman said, he had a meeting scheduled with Mr. Darnell this morning. He came into the library and found the colonel's body. Why did he go to the library? The detective asked. Sometimes the directors have breakfast there together, explained the policeman. They use that time to talk about business. Hawthorne nodded slowly. I will need to speak to all of them. Let's start with Mr. Gray. Does he work in the main house or somewhere else on the estate? All the directors work inside the manor, the policeman answered. Detective Hawthorne took a deep breath and looked around the quiet room again. The case was just beginning. Many questions were still unanswered. Why was the colonel killed in the library? Who wanted him dead? And what secrets were hidden behind the walls of Darnell Manor? The detective was ready to find out. Chapter 3. Financial Troubles. Detective James Hawthorne walked into a small, neat office inside Darnell Manor. Sitting behind a large desk was Mr. Gray, the finance director. He was a man in his early 50s, wearing a dark suit. His face looked serious and a little nervous. Good morning, Mr. Gray, the detective said politely. I am Detective Hawthorne. I am here to ask you some questions about Colonel Darnell's death. Mr. Gray nodded quickly. Yes, of course. It's a terrible shock. The colonel was a good man. I still can't believe he's gone. Hawthorne took a seat and opened his notebook. I want to know about the company and the colonel's role in it. Anything you tell me could help with the investigation. Mr. Gray took a deep breath. Well, the company has been having a hard time lately. This past year, we made much less money than before. The business is not doing well. The detective listened carefully. What kind of business is it? We make board games, Mr. Gray explained. Colonel Darnell's son, Edward, created the company. It was very successful for a time, but sales have dropped recently. Many people don't play board games as much anymore. Hawthorne nodded thoughtfully. Did Colonel Darnell have much to do with the company's finances? Mr. Gray gave a small, embarrassed smile. Not really. The colonel was not very interested in money or business. He didn't understand much about finance. I had to explain some things to him. Even basic terms like bull market and bear market. The detective raised an eyebrow. That is unusual for a company owner. Mr. Gray sighed. Yes, it made my job more difficult. The colonel cared more about the games themselves than the business side. Hawthorne made a note. Were you at the meeting this morning with the other directors? Yes, of course, Mr. Gray replied. It was an informal meeting, but all directors were there. I had some concerns I wanted to discuss. What kind of concerns? Asked the detective. Mr. Gray looked uncomfortable. Just company matters, he said quickly. Nothing I thought would interest the police. The detective's eyes narrowed. This is a murder investigation, Mr. Gray. If you are hiding something, it could be important. Mr. Gray sighed deeply. All right, detective. I noticed something strange in the company's accounts. There have been large expenses in marketing and sales. Specifically, Ms. Wells' department has been spending a lot on market research. Hawthorne nodded. And do you think this spending is justified? Mr. Gray shrugged. I'm not sure. Ms. Wells is new. She has many ideas, but some think she spends too much money. I plan to ask the others about it. The detective made another note. Did you tell Ms. Wells about your concerns? Not yet, said Mr. Gray. I wanted to discuss it in the meeting. Hawthorne looked closely at Mr. Gray's face. Do you suspect anyone in particular? Mr. Gray shook his head. No. I just want to save the company. That's all. Detective Hawthorne closed his notebook. Thank you, Mr. Gray. Your honesty is appreciated. As Hawthorne left the office, he thought about what he had learned. The company was in trouble, and money problems might have caused tension among the directors. But was that enough to cause murder? The detective knew he needed to speak with the other directors. The answers might be closer than he thought. Chapter 4. Corporate Strategy. Detective James Hawthorne made his way to the back of Darnell Manor. He was going to meet Mr. Ford, the managing director of the company. Mr. Ford's office was on the ground floor, near the garden. The detective noticed the office was clean and modern. Papers were neatly arranged on the desk, and there was a small table with several computers. Mr. Ford stood up as Hawthorne entered and gave a firm handshake. Please, have a seat, Detective, Mr. Ford said with a confident smile. Hawthorne sat down and opened his notebook. Thank you, Mr. Ford. I am here to learn more about the company and the events before Colonel Darnell's death. Mr. Ford nodded. Of course. It's been a difficult time for us. The detective started. I spoke with Mr. Gray earlier. He told me the company is facing financial problems. Yes, Mr. Ford replied. After Lord Ashcroft died 6 months ago, the business started to struggle. Lord Ashcroft was the true business brain behind the company. He managed the growth in both Britain and America. Hawthorne listened carefully. What happened after Lord Ashcroft's death? Unfortunately, the company lost direction. Colonel Darnell was a genius in creating games, but not a businessman, Mr. Ford explained. He stayed home and trusted others to run the business. Mr. Ford sighed. The sales have dropped. People don't play board games as much as before. Children want new kinds of entertainment like video games. The detective made a note. What about the workshops? Mr. Gray mentioned some disagreements about them. Mr. Ford leaned forward. Yes, the workshops are expensive. Mr. Gray wants to close them to save money. But Colonel Darnell refused. He loved the workshops. He said they made the company special. Hawthorne nodded slowly. It sounds like there were many conflicts. Exactly, Mr. Ford said. The directors have different ideas. Mr. Gray focuses on numbers and budgets. Ms. Wells wants to invest in marketing and research. I try to see the big picture. What do you mean by the big picture? Asked Hawthorne. Mr. Ford smiled. The big picture is the future. We need to find new ideas and modernize. I believe computers and technology are the future of gaming. The detective raised an eyebrow. Have you discussed making computer games? Yes, Mr. Ford replied. I suggested creating a computer version of one of our board games. It could save the workshops and attract new customers. Hawthorne took notes quickly. How did Colonel Darnell respond? He was angry at first, said Mr. Ford. But he finally agreed to consider it. The detective looked up. Did this cause any arguments? Mr. Ford nodded. Yes, there were loud fights. The stress was high. Hawthorne asked, What about Ms. Wells? What is her role in the company? She is our marketing and sales director, Mr. Ford explained. She is smart and full of ideas. I support her spending on market research. Mr. Ford laughed lightly. Mr. Gray worries too much about small details. Ms. Wells thinks bigger. Hawthorne smiled. It sounds like the company is divided. Very much so, said Mr. Ford. If we don't act soon, the company may not survive. The detective closed his notebook. Thank you, Mr. Ford. This information is very helpful. As Hawthorne left the office, he thought about the challenges the company faced. Old traditions versus new ideas, money problems and personal conflicts. It was clear that the murder was not just about business. There were deeper tensions at play. Chapter 5. The Missing Clue. As Detective James Hawthorne was finishing his meeting with Mr. Ford, there was a knock at the office door. A young woman stepped inside. She was about 30 years old, dressed in a smart business suit. Her dark hair was neatly tied back, and she looked professional but worried. "Good morning," she said softly. "I'm sorry. I didn't know you were here." Mr. Ford smiled and said, Detective Hawthorne, this is Patricia Wells. She is our Director of Marketing and Sales. Hawthorne stood up and shook her hand. Nice to meet you, Ms. Wells. I'll need to speak with you about the Colonel's death. Patricia looked uneasy but nodded. Of course. This murder is shocking. I can't believe someone would want to hurt Colonel Darnell. I understand, Hawthorne said kindly. We will find out the truth. After Patricia left, a sergeant entered the room carrying something in his hand. Detective, we found this near the Colonel's body, he said, handing over a small card. Hawthorne took the card and examined it carefully. It was a playing card, but not from an ordinary deck. It looked old and worn. The card's background was yellow, and it had handwritten words on it. Most cards from the Darnell murder game were blue, but this one was different. He read aloud the note on the card. Press reports frighten investors. Loss of $30,000. The detective's eyes narrowed. It looks like Colonel Darnell was working on a new project, he said slowly. Something related to the stock market, maybe. The sergeant looked confused. A new game, sir? Yes, Hawthorne replied. This card could be a clue to why someone wanted to stop him. It might explain the murder. He thought for a moment. I will need to ask Ms. Wells about this card. She is in charge of marketing and sales. Perhaps she knows something. Later, Detective Hawthorne found Patricia Wells in her office. The room was filled with charts, reports, and colorful posters. She looked serious as he showed her the yellow card. Have you ever seen this before? Hawthorne asked. Patricia shook her head slowly. No, I haven't. It doesn't look familiar. Do you think it's important? He continued. Yes, she said. Colonel Darnell was very secretive about his new ideas. He didn't share details with many people. Hawthorne nodded. This card suggests he was working on a game related to financial markets. Is that true? Patricia hesitated. I'm not sure. I heard rumors, but he never told me directly. The detective's mind raced. If the Colonel was developing a new game, someone might have wanted to stop him, maybe to protect their own interests. He thanked Patricia for her time and left her office with many questions. Outside, Detective Hawthorne looked up at the gray sky. The case was becoming more complex. The old murder game was not just a game anymore. It was part of a real and dangerous mystery. Who wanted to silence Colonel Darnell? And what secrets did the yellow card hide? Hawthorne knew the answers were waiting to be uncovered in the walls of Darnell Manor. Chapter 6. The Artist's Insight. Detective James Hawthorne left Patricia Wells' office and headed to the next room. He was going to meet Mr. Clark, the production director. Mr. Clark was a man in his late 50s, with a calm smile and kind eyes. As Hawthorne entered, he saw many papers scattered across the desk and colorful drawings pinned to the walls. "Good morning, Mr. Clark," said the detective. "I'm here to ask you some questions about Colonel Darnell and the company." Mr. Clark nodded warmly. "Of course, Detective. Please, have a seat." Hawthorne looked around the room. "This is a very creative space. I see a lot of artwork." Mr. Clark smiled proudly. "Yes, I was an artist before I joined the company. I painted many of the illustrations for our games." The detective picked up a large box on the desk. The cover showed a vivid battle scene, with soldiers in colorful uniforms. "This looks amazing. Did you create this?" "Yes," Mr. Clark said. "This game is based on a real battle in France during World War I. Every detail is accurate. The uniforms, the weapons, even the landscape." Hawthorne studied the box carefully. "You must be very talented." Mr. Clark chuckled softly. "Thank you. I spent 3 weeks in France researching this battle. I wanted the game to feel real." The detective then asked, "Did Colonel Darnell work closely with you?" Mr. Clark nodded. "Yes, he valued my work. When Edward started the company, he gave me the job as chief illustrator. Later, I became production director. I have painted all the games since." Hawthorne was curious. "Do you know if Colonel Darnell was working on a new game?" Mr. Clark looked thoughtful. "He didn't tell me much. He kept his new ideas secret, even from me. Sometimes he gave me a short description, just enough to start designing characters and the game board. But," Mr. Clark continued, "he never gave me the clue cards until the very end. So, I didn't know how to play the new games until they were finished." Hawthorne frowned slightly. "That sounds like he trusted very few people." Mr. Clark smiled again. "Yes, he was very careful. He wanted to protect his ideas." The detective showed him the yellow card they had found near the colonel's body. "Do you recognize this?" Mr. Clark looked at the card for a moment, then shook his head. "No, I don't remember seeing that one." Hawthorne nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Clark. Your help is very valuable." As he left the office, Hawthorne thought about the artist's words. The colonel's secret new game could be the key to the mystery. But why keep the clue cards hidden? And who would want to stop him? The detective knew that the answer might lie not only in the business, but also in the passion and creativity behind the games. With these thoughts, Detective Hawthorne prepared to meet the next person, someone who might reveal more about the company's hidden secrets. Chapter 7: Hidden Motives. Detective James Hawthorne returned to the heart of Darnell Manor, heading towards Patricia Wells' office once again. He had more questions for her. The mysteries surrounding the company and Colonel Darnell's death were growing deeper. When Hawthorne entered, Patricia was sitting at her desk, looking calm but serious. She greeted him quietly. "Detective, how can I help you today?" Hawthorne took a seat and began gently. "Ms. Wells, I want to understand more about the company's situation. You mentioned you started working here about 5 months ago. Is that correct?" "Yes," she replied. "I joined after Lord Ashcroft passed away." Hawthorne nodded. "Lord Ashcroft was the business expert, wasn't he?" "That's right," Patricia said softly. "He ran the company's business side. After he died, things became difficult." Patricia paused for a moment, then continued. "Colonel Darnell was old and stubborn. He didn't want to accept that. The company was losing money. He had no new ideas. After Lord Ashcroft died, he seemed to give up." Detective Hawthorne listened carefully. "It was painful to watch," Patricia said quietly. "We all knew the company was in trouble. The losses were very bad." Hawthorne asked, "What about Mr. Ford? You seemed close to him." Patricia's face flushed slightly. "We're just colleagues," she said quickly. "There's nothing more." The detective looked at her thoughtfully. "I heard you and Mr. Ford were talking in his office recently. What was the conversation about?" Patricia looked nervous. "It was nothing important, just company matters." Hawthorne pressed gently. "This is a murder investigation, Ms. Wells. I need everyone to be honest." She sighed deeply. "All right, I'll tell you the truth." Patricia explained. "Mr. Ford told Colonel Darnell that the workshops were too expensive. He wanted to shut them down to save money, but Colonel Darnell refused." She continued. "Mr. Ford thought if we showed the Colonel some market research reports, it might change his mind. I agreed to help because I believed it would." "Save the company?" Hawthorne asked. "So the idea to do the research was Mr. Ford's?" "Yes," Patricia said. "I worked on the reports. I thought they would help." "What happened next?" the detective asked. "I gave the reports to Mr. Ford last week. He took them to Colonel Darnell. They had a loud fight. Everyone heard it, but I don't know what was said." Patricia looked confused and worried. "But what does that have to do with the murder?" Hawthorne reached into his pocket and pulled out the yellow card found near the Colonel's body. "Have you ever seen this before?" he asked. Patricia studied the card but shook her head. "No, I haven't. Is it important?" "Yes," Hawthorne said. "It means Colonel Darnell was working on a new game when he was killed. Maybe someone wanted to stop him." Patricia looked shocked. "But he hadn't made a new game for years. Why would anyone want to stop him now?" The detective looked into her eyes. I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. Patricia nodded slowly, understanding the seriousness. As Hawthorne left her office, he thought about the hidden motives behind the murder. Personal struggles, business conflicts, secret projects, all tangled together. The detective knew the truth was closer than ever. Chapter 8. Revelations. Detective James Hawthorne returned once again to Mr. Gray's office. Mr. Gray looked tired and worried as he sat at his desk, studying the company's financial records. The detective could see the strain in his eyes. Good afternoon, Mr. Gray, Hawthorne said gently. I wanted to discuss the company's expenses in more detail. Mr. Gray sighed deeply. It's not good, Detective. Since Lord Ashcroft died, the company has been struggling. Now, with Colonel Darnell gone, the future looks even darker. Hawthorne nodded. I understand. Can you show me some of the records? Mr. Gray opened a folder and pointed to several pages. Here are the phone bills, he explained. We spent nearly £2,000 on international calls in just 4 months. That's much more than usual. The detective frowned. That is unusual? Do you know why? No, Mr. Gray admitted. It worries me, but I don't have an answer. Hawthorne looked at him with sympathy. I believe Colonel Darnell was working on a new game before his death. Do you know anything about that? Mr. Gray shook his head. No, but do you think someone killed him because of the game? It's possible, the detective replied. Tell me about the argument between Colonel Darnell and Mr. Ford. Mr. Gray hesitated. I was in Mr. Clark's office when they were fighting. I couldn't hear the words clearly, but I heard Colonel Darnell say, "We'll do it your way." Hawthorne asked, Do you know what they were arguing about? Probably the workshops, Mr. Gray answered. Mr. Ford wanted to close them. Colonel Darnell did not agree. Later that evening, Detective Hawthorne went to a quiet pub near the manor. The soft lights and warm fire created a peaceful atmosphere, a sharp contrast to the tension of the day. Hawthorne sat with the sergeant and took a sip of his drink. This is nicer than the noisy pubs in the city, he said quietly. The sergeant nodded. Yes, it is. They talked for a while, and the sergeant shared a story. A local officer told me Colonel Darnell had a son named Charles. They had a fight over a girl. Charles left for America and never came back. No letters, no calls. Then he died in a car crash. Hawthorne listened carefully. That's sad. The sergeant continued. Colonel Darnell lived alone after that, with all his money, no close family. The detective thought deeply. They had many suspects, but still no clear reason for the murder. Just then, a group of young people entered the pub. They played loud music and turned on video games. The peaceful moment was gone. Hawthorne frowned. Mr. Ford believes computers are the future, he said, but I think it's too noisy. That night, the detective had a strange dream. He was playing the Darnell murder game with a young boy named Billy. He looked at the suspects. Lights flashed. Laughter echoed. Words circled in his mind. No phone calls. The future. Too much money. Suddenly, something made sense. He woke up with the answer. Of course, he said quietly to himself. A smile appeared on his face. He finally understood. Chapter 9. Confronting the Suspects. The next morning, Detective James Hawthorne arrived early at Darnell Manor. He looked serious and ready for what lay ahead. Today was important. He was going to bring all the key people together. Hawthorne, it will be a busy day, said the sergeant as he met the detective at the door. Call all the directors to the library, Hawthorne said firmly. I want everyone there in 5 minutes. The sergeant nodded. Yes, sir. Hawthorne handed the sergeant a piece of paper. Call my office in the city. Ask them to check this immediately. It's urgent. Bring me the answer as soon as you have it. The sergeant looked surprised, but quickly left to make the call. Hawthorne went to the library and waited quietly. One by one, the directors arrived. They looked nervous and unsure. They sat silently at the long table. Hawthorne stood up and spoke clearly. We all know someone killed Colonel Darnell in this room, he said, and the killer is sitting here right now. Everyone looked around, afraid and unsure. Harrison Ford, Hawthorne said, pointing at the managing director. You've been playing a dangerous game. That game is over. Ford looked shocked. Me? You're wrong. I didn't kill him. This is a mistake. Hawthorne did not stop. You lied to the police. You said you went to the library at 8:50, saw the body, then called the police at 9 wow. But the library is only 2 minutes from your office, Hawthorne continued. So where were you for 6 minutes? Ford looked pale and nervous. I can explain. Also, said Hawthorne, you had a big fight with Colonel Darnell about the workshops. You wanted to close them. He said no. Mr. Clark, the production director, spoke up. Yes, we all knew about that. He wanted to keep the workshops open. Hawthorne continued. You asked Ms. Wells to make market research reports. You thought they would change Colonel Darnell's mind, but they didn't. You argued again. Everyone heard it. Ford stood up shaking. Wait, I admit I lied, but I didn't kill him. I'll tell you what really happened, he said, his voice trembling. Hawthorne nodded. Go ahead, Ford explained. Colonel Darnell had created a new game. It was about the stock market. Players had to buy and sell shares. He believed it could save the company. But I thought it was old-fashioned, Ford said. I wanted to make it a computer game. I showed him the reports. I made a deal. If we made a computer version, we could keep the workshops open. At first, he was angry, Ford continued, but in the end, he agreed. Hawthorne asked, "Then what did you do for 6 minutes in the library?" Ford said, "I saw the cards for the new game on the floor. I picked them up. I didn't want anyone else to take them, but one card was missing. Card number 57. The detective smiled slightly. "You're finally telling the truth, but I already knew you weren't the killer." "Then why did you accuse me?" Ford asked, confused. "Because I needed to hear the full story," Hawthorne said, "and you wouldn't tell it unless you were scared." The directors looked at each other, the tension in the room thick. Hawthorne knew the next steps would be crucial to solving the mystery. Chapter 10. The Truth Unveiled. Detective James Hawthorne closed his notebook and looked around the room. The directors sat quietly, their faces tense and serious. "I wasted too much time focusing on Mr. Ford's lies," Hawthorne said slowly. "But I should have paid more attention to the murder itself." Ms. Wells looked confused. "What do you mean, Detective?" she asked. Hawthorne took a deep breath. "Think about the Darnell murder game," he said. "It always starts the same way. The colonel is found in the library, shot with his own pistol. That is exactly how Edward Darnell was killed." He looked directly at Mr. Clark. "That made me think of you. You loved those games. They were your life." The detective paused for a moment before continuing. "Then I remembered something Mr. Gray told me. He heard Colonel Darnell say, 'We'll do it your way,' to Mr. Ford. He thought they were talking about the workshops, but you heard that too, didn't you?" Mr. Clark's face changed. He looked shocked, but did not deny it. "That gave you a reason to be angry," Hawthorne said firmly. "You thought Colonel Darnell was going to close the workshops, the place where you and your artists worked for years. You loved those workshops. You had every reason to want revenge." Mr. Gray asked quietly, "So did Mr. Clark do it?" Hawthorne shook his head. "No, he didn't kill Colonel Darnell. He was angry, but not the murderer." Then Hawthorne turned back to Mr. Gray. "I started thinking more about the stock market game. Edward Darnell didn't know much about business. Someone must have helped him." He looked at Mr. Gray. "You told me you explained bull and bear markets to him. That means you helped with the new game." Mr. Gray looked embarrassed. "Yes, I helped him, but I didn't kill him. I was just scared to say anything before." Hawthorne nodded. That's all right. I thought the murder was about the new game, but I was wrong. He looked at Ms. Wells. The real killer didn't care about the game at all. Isn't that right? Ms. Wells laughed a little. You still don't know who killed him, do you, Detective? Just then, the sergeant entered the room holding a piece of paper. He handed it to Hawthorne and nodded. The detective read the paper carefully. Then he turned back to the others. There's one more thing, he said. Mr. Ford showed me Ms. Wells' book on marketing. The spelling and the publisher are American. That made me wonder, has Ms. Wells lived in America? He looked straight at her. Or should I say Mrs. Darnell, the wife of Charles Darnell? Everyone gasped. Ms. Wells's face turned pale. Tears filled her eyes as she began to cry. Yes, it's true, she said softly. Charles and I loved each other, but his father did not accept us. Charles left for America, and I went with him. We got married. Then Charles died in a car accident. I wrote to his father for help, but he never replied. Charles died thinking his father did not love him. Hawthorne asked gently, So, you came here for revenge? She nodded slowly. Yes. I hated Edward Darnell. After Lord Ashcroft died, I saw a chance. I used my skills to get a job here. Edward never met me before, so he did not recognize me. She took a deep breath. I wanted to hurt him. I shot him with his own pistol, just like in the game. But before I did it, she continued, I told him who I was. The detective stayed calm. But it wasn't just revenge, was it? Ms. Wells said nothing. Hawthorne held up the paper. We checked with America. You and Charles had a son. Edward Darnell had no other family. If he died without changing his will, your son would inherit all the money. Ms. Wells cried harder. The room was silent. Hawthorne turned to the sergeant. Arrest her. As she was led away, Detective Hawthorne sat back in his chair. He had solved the mystery of the Darnell murder. Justice was done. The case was closed. Great work today. Every moment you spend practicing brings you closer to mastering your English listening and speaking skills. Remember, progress comes with patience and consistency. If this story inspired you or helped you in your learning journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Easy English Spark channel for more lessons and stories. Keep listening, keep speaking, and keep believing in your growth. I'll see you in the next video. Take care and keep shining.